Well, greetings, everybody. It's Mark Little from CareQuest Solutions. It's been a while. Life kind of happens, doesn't it? And we find ourselves too busy dealing with things going on in our own life. But I'm getting some things kicked back off here, and I'm proud to say today we have Avante Upshaw and Hannah Kimble from Hallmark In-Home Healthcare. So let's count this down. Let's get Avante and Hannah in here, and let's do this. Well, good morning, Avante and Hannah. How are we doing today?
Doing well. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Doing good.
Very,
Morning.
very good. Well, let's get this show kicked off this lovely Monday morning. And so obviously it's this Hallmark Home Care. So Avani, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started in starting this franchise?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having Hallmark on your platform. We're super grateful for the opportunity. I think our minds are aligned. We're trying to really build the community and help where needed. But again, my name is Avante Upshaw. I'm actually born and raised in Atlanta. Grew up in Lithonia specifically, but Georgia boy all the way through. Went to Georgia Tech for my undergrad. Ultimately, that was actually my first time outside of Atlanta when I graduated from the university there, and lived all over. Traveled a lot. In my career, my background is mostly in operations engineering, so traveled a lot around the country, mostly domestic, of course, and spent a lot of time in corporate from a supply chain and operations standpoint. Ended up getting my master's at Penn State around the 2016 mark. And so it's been a very great career, a lot of opportunities there. I met my wife, Mallory, at Georgia Tech as well. We have two kids, a 4-year-old and a son, and a 2-year-old princess who really is the CEO of the household here. And so we're very family oriented. I mean, we moved around a lot with our careers, but when the pandemic happened in 2020, that really hit home for us. And we wanted to, at the time, we were actually living in Boston, Massachusetts, which was actually one of the hotbeds when COVID first started in March of 2020. During that time, my father had major heart surgery. My grandmother had cancer. She was actually in and out of the hospital. My wife's grandfather, so my grandfather-in-law, was also admitted to a nursing home late 2019, heading into 2020. So we had a lot of family, issues here, and we got homesick, and we wanted to get back home to our family and be there for our loved ones, especially because we just started having a family, of our own. And so when we got to Atlanta, it was great. We bought a home and close to both of our families, but we were a very integral part in making sure that everyone was supported, and it was tough, during that time. With my dad, with his heart surgery, he had pre-existing conditions, and so he was in a very sensitive state, during that time. Um, Same thing with our grandparents as well. And so, unfortunately, my dad is still living, but unfortunately, our grandparents did pass away during that time. Uh, my wife's grandfather actually was in a nursing home, and he got an infection. And in addition to COVID, he actually got COVID and ended up passing away. He had a stroke. And so that was a very devastating time, of course, because it was also hard for family to get around during that time. This is pre-vaccine, okay? And so my grandmother also died during that same year. She died in her home, actually, in her sleep. And so it was a little bit of a different situation, but that actually motivated me to, get into the health industry. As I mentioned in my background, I have no background in health in a traditional format, but my personal experience is what led me to do that. And so I've always wanted to, you know, I had an entrepreneurship spirit. So I always wanted to start a business specifically with friends and families of mine that I trusted. And that business I wanted to be and having a positive impact to the community. And so there's a lot of different things, a lot of different industries you can go into, in order to make money or to be self-sufficient. But for me, my main motivating factor was to sort of solve an issue that I was personally having. And I had two examples. And so, my grandfather-in-law was in a nursing home that unfortunately he wasn't getting the best care. And because he wasn't getting the best care, he was more susceptible to, some of the challenges that he was having, UTI infections and getting COVID in the nursing home. Whereas my grandmother specifically, she had 9 kids. And so I actually had
Whoa.
several uncles that were retired that were still living in Alabama. My grandmother was living in Alabama, and they would rotate. They would be her full-time, caregiver. So my mom specifically would actually travel from Atlanta to Phoenix City, Alabama, to check on my grandmother every weekend, really. And in between, my aunts and uncles, her siblings would help. And so she was sort of getting that in-home care, but not in a
Mm.
formulated situation, but it was something that actually helped her to sort of live longer, despite, her cancer there. Whereas with my grandfather-in-law, it was total opposite. And so his children weren't in a position to sort of be his caregiver or to bring him to a home that was in a proper condition to be safe, from the elements. And so it was very devastating. And so I came up with this idea, worked with, my business partners and said, hey, what if we, had an agency where we can actually help people get care in the home, age comfortably in their own home, be in their own space, have a scope of care that's actually designated for them specifically based on, age, based on, their diagnostics. And this is all physical health. We haven't even mentioned, the mental side of it with dementia and all.
Mm.
So I did some research. I spent 2 years doing research on this, Mark, and really wanted to understand the industry as a whole and also understand, well, where can I fit in as an owner or as an entrepreneur to do this. And so in doing my research, I stumbled across Hallmark Homecare. It was a franchise model that, stemmed from the traditional home care agency, brick and mortar. They came from Senior Care Choice in 1982, based in
Oh, wow.
in Nevada and California. And then they spanned out across the nation. The model that we currently have today actually started in 2019. The first franchise was actually in New York City. And so when I had an opportunity to actually meet the owners of Senior Care Choice, who ultimately franchised this model out, it gave me a lot of insight as to how this business model will have a great impact for the community. And so we are a combination of both things, the pros of your registry and the pros of the traditional agency model, where we recruit and vet out caregivers that are professional CNAs, PCAs. We can actually recruit RNs as well.
Mm.
And place them and match them up with families in need. And so we'll have a conversation with the family, get an idea of what's needed, what are challenges that they're having, just develop a relationship with them and develop a rapport. And ultimately, once we understand where the complications are, we have caregivers on our registry that we would match up. So say if you have a family that has a dad that is suffering from, high Alzheimer's and maybe has a catheter bag because he's suffering from UTI, and maybe he's wheelchair bound. We take all that data and put it in our database to find a caregiver that has the skill set and the scope that can match that need, while also being 15 minutes away from the home, so that if something happens, they can get there immediately. And so what we're doing is providing this on-demand personal concierge care in the home, and we're doing it at an economical price because we're a firm believer that it shouldn't be a privilege to get premium care in the home. I know that the medical industry is very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, but ultimately that is what our goal is, and that's what Hallmark is founded on.
Yeah. Let me on that note there, I do want to bring something up that's important. But
Yeah.
before I do that, Hannah, jump in here and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with Avante and his team. And so just give us a little bit of a quick background on yourself, and I want to
Sure.
interject something Avante just said.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Hannah Kimble. I am the business development manager for Hallmark Homecare. Worked corporate America. I was the regional vice president for a staffing agency for about 15 years. During COVID, I we had a major layoff with the company that I was working for, so I decided that I would start my own company. So that's what I did. I started my own company doing staffing and recruiting, headhunting. And it's something that was basically like the norm for me. It's something I can do with my eyes closed. It's something I can do in my sleep. It was my comfort zone. But I had an opportunity that arose with Avante and his partners, and they asked me to come into Hallmark and begin doing some business development work for them. I was super super excited because number one, it's transitional skills from things that I've already done before, so I knew I could grasp the concept. But from a personal standpoint, it was just something that I'd always been passionate about. And that's how I got into the industry. My father was actually in hospice care when I was a teenager, and I just remember during that time it was a super hard time. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was the first time I'd ever seen someone pass away in person. And I just remember during the entire time that he was in hospice care, the nurses and the PCAs and the CNAs that were coming in and out of the home, they were just so kind to me, and they were so loving, and they treated me with the most respect, and they were very understanding. And I just wanted to continue that. And you hear so many stories about seniors and people that are in chronic condition or terminal conditions that don't get the best treatment. And I wanted to be a part of an organization that I knew vetted their people, got the best of the best caregivers out there, and could make an impact on someone's life just like they did mine. So
Yeah.
where I was.
Very good. With Avante, guys got to go with Hannah. She's an incredible
Thank you,
person.
Mark.
So, I want to jump in there. And the reason I started this podcast was to try to make a difference, to be able to try to come along and put content out there in the space for people to stumble across this and kind of see the resources that are available out there from A to Z. It didn't take long to realize it's hard to get people to want to engage and watch and these kind of reality type of podcast shows, because they want to escape, because life can get overwhelming. But regardless of, you're going to be forced in this situation. If God gives the days to live, you're going to experience it. I always say, you've been through it, you're going through it. If you live long enough, you're going to go through it. Been going through it myself with my own family, and mom's been home with hospice for 15 months, and that's against all odds. Yeah, I've said bye to her 4 times, been in bed, stunned that she's survived to this stage of life. And my dad died first. So I'm saying all that to say, when someone is out there and they're looking for in-home care, it's important to always say there's a difference between in-home health and in-home care.
Right.
And Avante, Hannah, I think it's important that you kind of share, like Avante, you had mentioned affordable, cost. Let's get real. It's expensive out there. It's expensive to do anything. My mom was receiving 24-hour in-home nursing care. They were coming out of pocket $10,000 a month. It was actually $15,000 a month, but they had long-term care insurance, and 5,100 of that was reimbursed. So 10 grand a month just for the care, and that was at a still of a deal. When I say a still of a deal, it was $20 an hour with actual retired nurses. So I'm sharing that, Avante, for you to share the importance of not everybody can find that. So you're pushed into the market of choosing an in-home care company. And as you know, you did 2 years worth of research. There's a lot to choose from in the market space, especially here in Georgia.
Right.
So this is the opportunity to kind of say what does set you guys apart, what makes your CNAs and nurses any special. And when you say CNA and nurses, that's two different calibers of experience, and
Right.
that brings along two different costs. Obviously, as a business person, you have to make money as a business. The caregivers have to make money to pay their bills, and at the end of the day, the families are left with the paying that. Whether they have insurance or not, it does get expensive. So get into that side of it. What are your pricing models and how are you able to compete in the space and what sets you guys apart, which I think would be important.
Yeah, absolutely. And great questions there, Mark. In full transparency, it can be expensive. Absolutely. Especially because at Hallmark, we do not take Medicaid nor Medicare. However, we do take long-term care insurance. Now, the reason for that is because whenever you do have to take Medicaid or Medicare, what it does, it actually constrains the scope and the capabilities of what can be offered, under those policies versus private pay. And that's actually one of our biggest value propositions is that we do not have those constraints. And so, no matter if you're looking for care for only maybe 5 hours a week, or if you're looking for 24/7 around the clock care, we can actually take on that family. We don't have any minimum hour requirements. We don't have any weekly or daily requirements, no upfront fees, no contracts. What we're trying to provide is tailored care for that family. And that can encompass anything from going to the grocery store, taking out the trash, doing art activities, basic companionship activities, all the way to more acute complex care where you're doing wound care, handling bed sores and things of that nature, maybe even working with a feeding tube. And so the depending on the scope of care is going to dictate that price. What we're trying to do is be under the market 10 out of 10 times. And so in the greater Atlanta area, what we found is that pricing can range. If you go to a traditional agency, pricing can range anywhere between $28 to $40 an hour. It's a very, very large range depending on the agency and depending on where you are and what kind of care you need. For us, we try to understand what is that family's budget and what do you honestly need, and then we work backwards from there. We're not thinking about margin, or we understand we're running a business and that's what you're paying us to do, but ultimately what we're trying to do is solve an issue and solve a pain point, right? And not take advantage of our families, which honestly we have seen other agencies do that, and we are very passionate about not doing that. That's why we actually run our business at a lower overhead than a lot of our agencies, because we actually pass those cost savings back to the family as opposed to harvesting that. And so ultimately what we're trying to solve is what is it that mom or dad needs, or the sibling. And then most of the time, a lot of the families, they're the actual caretakers of and so there's angst on their end. They're not to work as much as they need to. They're not able to focus on their own children, especially in what I would call the baby boomer generation, because they're actually sandwiched in between. So they're for their parents, and there are still caretakers for their children, some of them. And so there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety. A lot of families don't know what to do. They don't know how to vet out caregivers. There's a trust issue there. They're scared. The family is scared. And what we want to come in is not selling the family as though, we're car salesmen. No, we want to be a partner to you. We want to alleviate the stress that you have. And we want to bring in the insurances that that mom or dad is going to be okay. That's what you're paying us for. It's a very transparent process, Mark. We actually bring the family into the recruiting process. And so once we get an idea of what is needed in the scope of care, we actually introduce the caregiver to the family free of charge before we even get kicked off with anything, before they even start.
Very good. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we want you to be to be involved, to really be a part of the vetting process. We've had examples where families say, you know what, dad is used to going to church, every Sunday. He hasn't been able to do that because of the schedule, because of some of the health conditions, but we would love a caregiver to do that. Okay, great. That minor detail you may not be able to do in the traditional market, but you could do with Hallmark. So
Absolutely.
look at our registry and we say, okay, who are the young ladies or the gentlemen that wouldn't mind going to church, with this 10 o'clock service. And so we actually introduce that caregiver. They have a conversation with the family just to vet them out, to see if they have a good relationship with them, to see if they're comfortable in the environment, if there's pets in the home. We try to really get alignment at the very beginning, and the family loves that option. So it really gives some credence and rapport to what we do. And essentially what you're paying Hallmark is you're paying Hallmark to take that stress out of the equation. We handle it for you. We manage the caregivers, the timesheets, the insurances, the absenteeism. Our turnaround time for finding a caregiver is typically 72 hours. Now, if you have a caregiver that is absent, they typically would give us a week's notice when they need to be absent, whether it be for a doctor's appointment or something of that nature. Obviously, if emergencies come up, we have individuals on our registry that we could place in the home within 24 hours so that there's no huge gap in care just because of an absenteeism. And that's something that you're not seeing in the market because there's such a shortage of caregivers. So we don't really...
COVID really did a number on not only the entire world, but this industry specifically, because it was pretty rough how caregivers and nurses and all were treated. They went from hero to zero, and it was pretty horrible. And we all have the fallout. I had a sister die during that period. You obviously, it's a very challenging, difficult time. When it's a very challenging, difficult time anyway. A couple of things I want to point out that's important, that those of you that may come across this, or maybe you're considering Hallmark and they sent you this podcast so you can kind of see a little bit of behind the scenes. Some things that were pointed out that's important to note is Avante shared some things that are unique to Hallmark. The fact that they do allow you to kind of, be involved in the vetting process of the caregiver. That's extremely important. I see all sorts of stuff out here. We all do. This industry can be quite overwhelming. But I think it's important to go ahead and throw in there, if you're a caregiver, a family member, me and my sisters dealing with my mom and dad before he passed, it's a lot on the family, man. It's a lot. You've got life going on. You got your own kids, your own careers, your own days of just like overwhelming, just life. So you can look at this and that they do not charge a minimum. That's very challenging to come across. Most in-home care agencies do charge a minimum. So this is an opportunity where maybe I just need some respite. I need a break. I need someone to come in for just a couple of hours and let me go get a massage or get my nails done, or go golf, or just get some relief from the stress of it all. And it's okay to want to do that, because we have our emotions that we deal with when we're thrust into these roles of taking care of our elderly loved ones. It's a lot. It's natural to have animosities and bitterness, and you may not have had the best raising, so to speak, right? Not everybody had the, leave it to beaver type of family environments. So it's a lot to deal with. So take advantage of there not being, the minimum requirements. Being able to reach out and have a company that you're allowed to meet with the caregiver of this community, that's huge importance, because you may not get along with the person. So to have that option. So with that said, Hannah, is there anything you would like to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off Avante, when it came to me deciding which company I wanted to stamp my name on and just be a part of, hands down, Hallmark is the total package. I mean, it's just a great company, that the great values that they carry, and it exudes itself on every placement that happens with them. The families are extremely satisfied, and we always are receiving positive feedback. In fact, a lot of our new people that come in are from referrals, and referrals are huge. You know, when people that we've done business with trust us, like the service that we've offered, and now they're referring people to us. So, you know, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've witnessed it. It's a great company. They have the best caregivers. In fact, the vetting process for the caregivers to come into Hallmark, only about 5% of the people who apply for Hallmark to be a caregiver, only about 5% actually make it through. So when I tell you we have the best of the best when it comes to caregivers, we have the top of the line, top notch home care providers, and they are all passionate about what they do. So that's where we have been successful with helping families and just bringing a little bit of peace into the homes of the families, is because as passionate as we are about what we're doing out here, the caregivers that we have inside the homes are just as passionate.
Yeah.
Well, that's extremely, I want to add to that, Hannah, because just hearing you say that, um, all of the in-home care companies out there struggle to find good CNAs. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's a lot of them that hire what's called silent quitters. There's people that will I just want to take a paycheck. And I've had stories of agencies hiring a CNA, and next thing they know, they have a phone call that they didn't show up for a shift. You know, granted, those things happen, just, you know, accidents and this and that. But to hear that you only 5%, that shows the vetting process and the
Absolutely.
volume of interviews you go through to find that 5%. So hats off to that. So Avante, you got about a 60-second wrap up that you want to add before we go here?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, again, you know, Hallmark is here just to really help our community. You know, there's a lot of individuals out there that need help, you know, with their families, and it's a struggle with how our current, you know, medical industry is set up. But that's what Hallmark is here to do. As Hannah just mentioned, we get the best caregivers. Why? Because we pay them more, first of all. So we get the cream of the crop. We vet them out. They go through a very robust process, and we make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you and your. We don't dictate. The caregivers technically work for the family. What I mean by that is that as a family, what you all decide is what's most important, not what Hallmark thinks and not what the caregiver thinks, is what you think. And we bring in our expertise and our medical experience where it's applicable, and we fill in those gaps. But ultimately, our job is to solve issues for our community so that we can thrive together, and for people to feel more comfortable than the options that they have. And that's ultimately what we're charged to do.
Very good. Well, Avante, Hannah, it's been fantastic having you guys come on the show. I want to kind of add a little wrap up observations here. If you're a family that's been thrown into this situation, maybe you've had a loved one that's had to go into the hospital, and you're trying to decide that discharge process. That's kind of a jacked up situation. You're given a list of providers to choose from in-home health to in-home care to hospice to respite to on and on it goes. And so if you're here and you're trying to vet and decide what to do, then you've got a good head start here with Avante and Hannah and Hallmark. Um, just so you understand, a lot of people don't understand that maybe you're discharging and you're going to have hospice, right? Hospice doesn't provide the extra care. They'll show up a day or two a week, depending on the care needs. Some people think that you're getting more help there. You're not. Hospice does, covered by Medicare. All in-home care is private pay. So if you're out there trying to find an in-home care company, you're going to have a hard pressed time trying to find Medicare, Medicaid provided. And what happens is when you have a certain amount of assets, you've got to spend down before you are able to have the insurance kick in, and you're going to have to go into, of course, state paid nursing home thing. So if you do our private pay, you are a caregiver that's taking care of them yourself, and you want to start out just getting a little bit relief, you want to try to allow them to age in place as long as possible. This is a way for you to survive that mentally, physically, and spiritually, to buy a little bit more time and have good quality care come in. So I can tell you just off what I've known of this organization, you're in good hands. So give them a shot. Don't spend too much time chasing your tail, because there's a lot to choose from. And there are some agencies out there that you're going to have some CNAs come in that you'll be like, where'd they find these people? So anyway, with that said, I'm Mark Little, CareQuest Solution. And on behalf of Avante and Hannah, I want to thank everybody for watching. And so until the next episode, everybody have a great day. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.